Hey guys, welcome to the podcast where I, Coach Mike Payton, invite other coaches on, I interview them, I ask them questions, I hopefully get to learn things from them, and I hope you guys will learn something along the way. Let's get right into the podcast.
Week, ready to start shutting down the work brain as we do, get ready for the weekend and transition over. So before this I was podcasting and talking to, messing with the dog, talking with my buddy on the phone, and then I was in between listening to a podcast, like when I wasn't on the phone with him. So just kind of going about the day, getting some stuff done, doing lunch and all that.
Cool.
So, normal process. So what kind of topics before we jump in? What kind of topics are we getting into? Like, I'm open for anything. It can be fitness, nutrition, stuff like that. It can be anything. I mean, I don't care. So
cool.
I was just curious.
I'm like, mostly what I've been doing is like I have kind of a rough idea of like I could ask these kinds of questions.
Then
it just goes wherever it goes.
Right, so. It starts here, and then it just spins off. So kind of more just like open discussion, like get into whatever pop culture topic and/or
whatever's on your mind, whatever.
Yeah, there's lots. There's lots. Especially last few months, the knowledge seeking I've been doing, between podcast listening and all that. So,
what kind of podcasts do you listen to?
I've been absolutely sucking on the Huberman Lab teat, and I don't know if you're familiar with what's going on over there.
A little bit.
It is mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
It is like will change your whole life type of stuff.
Dang.
And it's really cool. I'm applying it to a lot of people that I'm working with, clients-wise, and it's pretty profound. But yeah, let's save that. Let's all save that for camera. Are we on there right now?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know where we were going. You didn't tell me when we started. Oh man, I'm over here like, we'll figure this out in secret.
I'm like,
my fault. Hey guys, I've never done one of these before. I didn't realize we were.
No, I was like, that's what I've been doing. It's just a conversation. I start the camera rolling, and then we just
makes sense.
Just chilling. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, am I supposed to look more at the camera, or am I supposed to look at you?
Whatever.
I don't know.
That's why I'm like, I have you kind of at an angle.
Yeah.
That way,
be able to do a little bit of
they can still kind of see your face.
Yeah.
But it's just.
Well, I guess if I want to like emphasize something, like, all right, guys, you gotta really take this with you. Like, I can look at them.
Yeah, one day I'll be really professional and have like two cameras.
Oh, that'd be good.
I have like a camera over here,
views.
and then like have that one.
You gotta get the boom mic too, just because it looks cool. Like, not even
the one right.
It does anything better, but just because it's cool. So we're live. We're talking about it then. The Huberman podcast.
Yeah, Huberman podcast.
Great way to start a podcast is to talk about a different podcast, which is the Huberman Lab. For me, has been just a game changer, and I don't know which one was the first one I listened to, but more or less, like in a nutshell, it's different topics dealing with brain, body, nutrition, fitness, well beyond that, even like different medications and effects. A lot of these different crazy categories, and then like the neuroscience behind it. So think like an ology, have you ever heard like the Ologies podcast where they dive into like you can learn about like chimpanzees or something like that, where they go deep dive into like all the things about chimpanzees, like, so it's like that, but it's like all like neuroscience based, and usually he has guests where he's talking, like they're like super highly respected in those fields, or it's just himself going through a topic and giving you just like data driven, scientifically backed, research based facts about stuff. But beyond facts, most of the things that he's covering, he also is giving tooltips or what he calls protocols for people to follow that you can apply by little behavioral habits to make some pretty dramatic changes. So like everyone here at this gym's probably heard me talk about deliberate cold exposure. And I've even made a couple videos myself. And it's because it keeps coming up and it's so profound, and I've done it now and I've experienced it, and I can honestly say that all the hype behind it is unbelievably true and realistic. And the science behind it, if you actually do the deep dive into all the systems that it engages, it'll just blow you away. Like, oh my God, it's as simple as that. It's as easy but as difficult as that, because it's hard to do, but it doesn't take a lot of time, so it's easy. But then the benefits you reap from it are just so profound that I get cold every day, sometimes multiple times with the shower or trying to get in the cold tub and do a longer one. But just like I listened to a whole nearly 3 hour podcast just on deliberate cold exposure, or like all these different topics between like brain chemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline, your adrenal signaling system, serotonin, how all those things work and what those drive. I listened to one on alcohol, like effects of alcohol in the brain and body, cannabis, effects of cannabis in the brain and body, caffeine. I did one on, it was like a 2.5-hour podcast on caffeine and all the ins and outs about caffeine. And like so each of those things, and some of them I've gone into that are more driven towards like strength conditioning, like programming for endurance and for strength versus power versus hypertrophy, really deep diving into those and specific methods and applications to maximize your gains there. So they're all over the place. But still all very narrowed and backed by neuroscience and how it all chemically is orchestrated throughout your brain and body and your muscles and your skeletal system. And it's just really, really fascinating stuff. And Andrew Huberman does a tremendous job of making it really relatable to the general public and really like understandable that you can really, really take in some really deeply scientifically based knowledge, but do it in a way that is very absorbable, even if you aren't super familiar with those systems. Like, my background with exercise phys being my degree, that I had exposure to a lot of these things in college, but it was like learn how to answer the question on the test. It wasn't really like absorb and understand like how this really works within you, but then also how you can like leverage your dopamine system or leverage your adrenaline system or be able to do things like maximize or optimize how much sleep you get and all the benefits and carryover that has to everything else. Like that stuff, now I'm going back to these things that I kind of knew enough about before. I understand like these exist and these are systems that make things happen. But now I like really am getting a thorough breakdown of like really what all those things do. So if you really want to learn your brain and learn it in a specific way and as it applies to something in your life, something you consume, nutrition, exercise, activity, whatever, there's probably a podcast on it over there, and it's mind-blowing. So super has been worth my time investment. I just can't get enough. I'm like, okay, after this one, what am I going to do next? I just started the one on sleep today.
Okay.
The other ones, a lot of them have had other little bits and applications about the importance of sleep and benefit, but now I'm going into like the mechanism and then also the protocols to be able to benefit and enhance your sleep.
Yeah.
Which I'm doing against one of those right now by my caffeine consumption after 12. But that's okay. It happens every night. Yeah, thank you though. No, and that's one of those cool things that literally just a couple months ago, I completely shifted my caffeine habits because I like just didn't know what I didn't know before.
Yeah.
Are you curious about that?
Well, so I was going to ask you a few questions. Like, what do you think a lot of people do right now that could easily be shifted from, like, whether it's caffeine intake or whether it's leveraging your dopamine system or even like why is cold exposure such a, I don't know, you said it has a lot of benefits, like why?
so like the basic of the question is like, what could you do starting out really simple to like really improve overall everything as much as you can before getting into the minutia specific protocols is, number one is like enhance your sleep. I keep hearing that like sleep, like don't sleep on your sleep, like get enough sleep, but also get the maximal effect from your sleep, meaning depth of sleep or quality of sleep, and things like your caffeine consumption heavily plays into that. Like that really blew me away, and when I made that change, I just immediately saw results because my watch can trap my sleep and even the different levels, and it probably doesn't give an exact, there's probably some degree of error in there, but it gives me a rough estimate enough that I can see transition. I can see that, hey, my overall average of this percentage was here before I made this change with my caffeine, and now it's here, and I've made those markers of REM sleep and deep sleep go up, which is what we need more of. So sleep is monumental, and what I learned is the biggest thing, besides some supplementation, there's a lot that goes into sleep. We can talk about sleep for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
But two big behavioral things that you can do right now to enhance your sleep. And we'll start with I said two behavioral things. We'll start with caffeine. We'll go back to caffeine. So I learned something about caffeine and its mechanism. First of all, we know caffeine makes us feel more alert and awake, and it does that in a couple ways. It's first of all, it increases dopamine, which increases your concentration, your focus, It increases norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are adrenaline and noradrenaline. It drives those up a little bit, which gives you that alert feeling, but it also works in a way in how it affects the molecules in our brain that makes us feel sleepy, which is adenosine in our body. So adenosine, when we're parks in a receptor spot to become active and engaged in your brain, and when it's doing that, it's giving you sensations or experience of tiredness. So this happens naturally when we want to fall asleep in the evening, and also when we first wake up, we still feel sleepy because our body's still clearing out adenosine. It goes through a natural process. So caffeine sits in the receptor for adenosine when you consume it. So it increases dopamine, increases adrenaline, all those things, which is great. Those are benefit effects that helps us to focus more. We get the positive things we want out of caffeine. So caffeine's a great thing and a great tool, great thing for brain optimization when you want to control that. But it can have an adverse effect on your sleep in that if you consume it immediately after waking up, or sooner than 60 to 90 to even 120 minutes after waking up, what you're doing is you're interrupting the adenosine's natural process to clear. And when that happens, when you interrupt that, you have caffeine park in those adenosine receptors. It's basically, it interrupts, it doesn't allow your body to clear those in the regular manner, and it kind of compartmentalizes that adenosine. And then when the caffeine wears off 3 to 4 hours later after consumption, that remaining adenosine that wasn't cleared out of that area the correct way and the natural way without the interruption of caffeine, it parks back in those receptors. So you get that midday tired. If you've ever had caffeine, if you have it right when you wake up, and if you experience it like a midday lull or like that caffeine crash, that little, that is because of that return of adenosine in your brain. So step one, and this step one plays into step two, because what do most people do when they have that midday caffeine? Oh, I'm tired because I'm tired. They drink more caffeine.
Yep.
And but what happens if you don't experience that tired? If you don't get that, and you just keep going, you're just good to go. And there's other things you can do other than caffeine to reset and actually recharge. One of them is called NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, another Huberman thing, but I would definitely mention that because it's really cool, which could drive us down a whole nother wormhole about meditation, which meditation's unbelievably cool.
Yeah. And
that's a whole wormhole I'm just starting to explore and discover, but for brain chemistry and everything like that. Back to caffeine though, back to sleep. So if you drink caffeine in the first, anything before 60 to 90 minutes, you interrupt adenosine comes back to haunt you later in the day. No juju, bad. So if you wait 60 to 90 minutes after you wake up, you let those natural adenosine things clear out on their own, you can then drink caffeine, reap all the benefits, and no adenosine later on, you don't get that midday crash, which then probably reduces your need for more caffeine. And the secondary thing about caffeine and really how it plays into sleep at nighttime is cool thing I learned. Caffeine has a 12-hour quarter life, meaning if you ingest 200 milligrams of caffeine at 12 noon, at 12 midnight, you'll still have 50 milligrams of caffeine in your system. That's its rate of depreciation, or way that your body rids of it or processes it. So the caffeine you drink during the day is still prevalent there later. So if you have, 200 milligrams of caffeine at 6 p.m., well, at 6 a.m. all through the night, you have caffeine circulating through your system, which may not reduce your ability to fall asleep or stay asleep, but it's going to affect the depth of your sleep and how much REM and how much deep sleep, or how much REM sleep and how much deep sleep you can get, which you need more of those to maximize the recovery that you get brain and body that sleep provides.
Yeah.
So, the things that I picked up from Huberman is wait 60 to 90, started doing that. Also said, hey, try to keep your consumption in before noon. So I can even have something at say I get up at 6:30, then around 8 a.m., 7:30 to 8 a.m. I'll have caffeine. Well, I could very much at 11, 3 hours later or so, have another dose of caffeine. No problem, no interaction, as long as it's within a correct range and dose and ratio for consumption that's not going to make you feel over-caffeinated. But I can still do that without having that affect my sleep in the day. So I can get a secondary boost of energy from caffeine, keep me going, keep me working, keep me effective longer, even going into that middle of the part of the day where I used to crash or maybe a little bit, or have to take that caffeine later. I'd wait it out. But now I'm interrupting my nighttime sleep stuff, which makes me feel more tired in the morning, and it's kind of a cycling effect.
Like a
so
catch-22 almost.
I saw immediate results on my watch. I made that change a couple months ago, and I saw my minutes of REM sleep, and deep sleep go up, and overall percentages made a pretty significant increase in percent. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And I started feeling it. I started noticing. I'm like, wow, I feel more refreshed in the morning than I was before. Because it used to be, get up in the morning, right thing, cup of coffee, bam, first thing. Interrupting those adenosines every single day, first thing. And then middle of the day, about 3 o'clock, taking more. So 3 a.m. that night, I still got that caffeine in my system. And taking that out, getting that worked, I've had more energy, less necessity for caffeine, overall consuming less caffeine, feeling overall better, and getting better sleep. And sleep is monumental. So I mentioned, what was the other thing? I mentioned another big driver in sleep. So we talked about caffeine. That's a big thing, especially for caffeine consumers. If you don't consume caffeine, you don't have to worry about the sleep effects. But if you want to start later morning, but not into the midday or afternoon, that late morning when usually most of us are working is the time to do it. And it can absolutely drive up performance because it increases those brain chemicals, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, all those things, which increase performance. So the other thing about sleep that I would mention, and this plays in a lot of other systems, is sunlight exposure. Crazy thing I learned is if sunlight exposure triggers some biological internal clocks when you get direct exposure for the first time in a day. So you set a clock off that plays into your circadian rhythm and your wakefulness and sleepiness cycle based on your first sun exposure of the day. So if that's at 8 a.m. or if that's at 11 a.m., that affects when you set that timer off. And that's outdoor real sun. When you go outside and get outdoor real sun, it is immensely more units of light compared to even like bright indoor lights.
Yeah.
And there's certain wavelengths and colors within morning sun and separate wavelengths and colors in evening sun that trigger reactions in our brain to signal wakefulness or waking up in the morning and sleepiness, becoming tired and becoming prepared for the nighttime. You're basically giving your body natural biological signals through sunlight that will help to regulate waking up at the appropriate times in the morning, sleeping at the appropriate times at night.
Damn.
And also releasing like serotonin and morning cortisol, like good amounts of proper chemicals that you could only get from natural sunlight. And I'm talking outside in that sun, even on a bright morning or like a cloudy morning, outside, even like through a window or a windshield, you're reducing the effectiveness by like 50 times.
Wow.
So it's like you've got to step outdoors and get in there natural sunlight for like 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how sunny it is, and you're setting off all these fucking biological markers and releases of neurochemicals just from sunlight alone.
Yeah.
That's just one thing you can do to start tapping those systems, which is really cool.
That is really cool.
2 like really easy habits to do to improve your sleep right now, not talking supplementations, are wait 60 to 90 minutes before drinking caffeine. Try to not drink it, but after like 12 noon or 1 p.m. And try to get morning sunlight exposure and try to get evening sunlight exposure outdoors to trigger those mental, and it has definitely helped me. I've had a noticeable difference on my ability to wake up in the morning. I don't even need an alarm clock anymore. It just happens. I just wake up when I wake up because it's so regulated. I wake up very refreshed, a lot of times even earlier, just because of now my sleep feels so much different. Getting the same amount of general time of sleep, that really hasn't changed. It's not like I'm getting an extra hour. I'm getting the same general amount of time, but I can feel the potency, the quality is improved, and I can see it statistically. I mean, I've got data to drive that. So it's been a fun experiment to do it myself. I had a really bad caffeine habit consumption before, and I didn't even realize it. I was just like, oh, we get tired in the middle of the day because, we work hard. And we worked out really hard, and I'm really tired from my remaining workouts, and I'm sore and beat up all the time, and then it's like, great, that's fine. And I was just like, oh, that's why I get tired in the middle of the day. Oh, more caffeine. And now I don't. I drink less caffeine. I usually have like 1 cup of coffee, maybe another one, something in the later morning, if I know I'm going to be busy throughout the middle part of the day, just to give myself that extra boost. But now I don't feel those draws, and I definitely noticed I'm sleeping better at night and getting better levels of sleep, and it's really cool. So
that is really cool.
That's like the number one tip. If like above all else, before anything else, like get your sleep figured out.
Yeah.
Because that is like I'm just diving into that pod. I'm 30 minutes into a 3-hour podcast on sleep, and I'm sure I'm going to come out of it and just go,
whoa,
what? What? Yes. Very cool stuff.
How do you think that because you said your circadian rhythm is affected by like morning sunlight exposure and then evening sunlight exposure or light exposure. how do you think that plays in? Because I was always saying this during like the winter months because it gets really dark.
Yeah.
And then, like you wake up at 6 a.m. every day.
Yeah.
It's still
And
dark
it's still
out.
blackout, yeah.
Yeah.
So you still get the same effects from bright lights in your house, but just not to the same degree. You're going to maximize when you can get that sunlight exposure. If in the early morning you can only have bright lights in your house because it's still dark, when the sun finally comes up in the winter, if you can get out there and catch that early sun, if possible, it's really beneficial too. But it works in both ways. In the morning, if you can't get real sunlight, just bright lights, bright LEDs in your house, it's good. Have those on, overhead lights. Don't be afraid of sunlight in the morning. But there's a complete adverse. So another big tool tip that I could put out there about sleeping at night or preparing to fall asleep is reduction of light past when the sun sets. Like people don't realize okay, some bright lights maybe. No, it's pretty significant how much bright lights in your house and our screens or a bright screen in front of your face if you're on your phone right up until sleep time, how much light exposure. People that sleep with like the TV on or lights on, like that's really not good, not great, and it's not helping your sleep and it's not helping your quality of sleep. Even if you're falling asleep and staying asleep, that light is bad. Waking up in the middle of the night, like if people have trouble and they wake up in the middle of the night and they go pee and then they flip the overhead bathroom light on and then they're like, oh, I was up for the next 30 minutes.
Yep.
Use your phone light instead. Your phone light is like immensely less obstructive than overhead lights. Or even in our house, we put these little motion sensor lights, like stick-on ones, on the bottom of our like bathroom cabinet. So like when you walk in, it's a light that's below your waist. So it illuminates it, so I don't even have to turn on the overhead light. I can still hit the toilet without peeing all over the bathroom, and wash my hands and stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't flip on the overhead lights and give myself that big jolt of light in the middle of the night that's going to really be obstructive to my sleep cycle. So little things like that, but it's like you don't really think about it as being that important until you start doing it, and then you realize, and it's like, okay, like these things really play a measure more so than most of us really give them credit for. So yeah, keeping the lights dim, like even if you're gonna watch TV late in the evening, that's okay. Just maybe not on like the brightest setting, or like don't have a bunch of lights on in your house. Like when the sun goes down, it's dark time. It's supposed to be dark.
Yeah.
In the morning, the sun's coming up. It's light time, and if you need to wake up a little bit before the sun's ready to come up, get the lights on, and that will have more than just a like. It has a real profound internal brain chemical effect that triggers wakefulness or triggers sleepfulness. So you have control over these things.
Yeah.
We have control over these things. And most people don't realize they have control over these things. Nor do most people realize that they're not getting as great a sleep as they perceive that they're getting. They think, I feel like I sleep pretty well throughout the night, but maybe you're just not getting into that much level of deep sleep, and or because you have bad caffeine habits, and or you're getting like bright light exposure late in the night, and those are the contributors to lesser quality of sleep. And that's, sleep is it's a third of our life, right? It's something that they were saying on this podcast, that part of the intro, that it's something that has evolved. All of the evolutionary changes of all mammals, sleep has stayed. We haven't wiped sleep out, because it's like if you look at sleep, we're completely vulnerable. We're not like taking care of things. We're not making money. We're not being productive. We're not producing anything. We're literally unconscious for like 7 to 8 hours. Well, ideally, because that's how long we need to get that full amount of recovery. And because that has evolved with us through human evolution for all these years, that it's an unquestionable, absolute necessity of nature that we have to prioritize. And if you just let your sleep go to shit, you are fighting against something that has stood millions of years the test of, for all mammals, that we have to have. It is an absolute need. And so you start getting less of that thing that we know as an absolute must, as much as the air we breathe, then you start looking at sleep a little differently. Like, okay, maybe that's pretty important.
Yeah, really.
Like I used to not really like, okay, I get enough, like the hours. I didn't really think about the quality or the depth. And now I'm like, okay. So now there's some supplements I take that help with, incorporating more of the brain chemicals that are associated with different parts of sleep to get greater amounts of REM sleep and things like that. So I'm trying to dive even deeper. Like, how can I absolutely take it to its max? So I'm getting like super sleep. I want super sleep, and then I want to see what Mike looks like on super sleep every day.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm pumped
really
about.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're talking about like screens at night. Have you like heard anything from like what you're researching and like listening to podcasts and stuff? How effective are like blue light glasses for like
They've mentioned those. Yeah, I think those things can definitely be helpful. Any kind of interference that you can put in a positive direction, like, okay, we know we need less light exposure after sundown hours, then anything from dampening or dimming to blue blockers. Don't see any reason why no. I think those things definitely have an effect. Just like some things as simple as turning more of your overhead lights off at night and just having like lower, like dim if you have dimmer switches and stuff like that, like taking advantage of those.
Yeah.
I think it's just as simple as that. Like, if their goal is to maximize, that category specifically, then doing something like that, or making sure every morning you get out into that early morning sun. It's just prioritizing, like, hey, what do I really want to do my best on? And again, like me, like I'm pursuing what level can I take it to without getting too crazy, right? I'm not doing ice baths that all like every 30 minutes per day or anything like that, but not taking things to extremes. But experimenting, having a lot of fun with, like, hey, let's play with how we can control and manipulate these brain chemicals that we have complete control of, and what that does to drive our energy and motivation and mood and concentration, all those different factors that allow us to do shit, right? So getting leverage over those systems has been pretty fun.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're along for the ride of just what your brain wants to do, but then you start driving, you start pushing those buttons, and you're like, okay, I got to get motivated for the day, and I got a bunch of stuff, and like it's a bit. And what's the best way to do that? Like jump into that ice bath. I know I'm going to feel like Superman for the next 4 hours or 6 hours. So like timing things up, timing your caffeine, which is same thing, has very similar effects to what the effects of an ice bath are, inducing those same chemicals. Timing those things up to coincide with you when you have bouts of work or intense, deep mental or physical exertion. I just don't drink caffeine to drink caffeine now. I know because I'm drinking it because I'm about to go get work done. Work, Empower work, or if I'm out busting it out in the yard for the next 4 or 5 hours, anything I can do to improve my performance. So I'm flying around there like a madman, but then I can just go about the rest of my day and still have energy.
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's cool.
What's the benefits of of cold exposure? So is it just like ice baths, or is it like could you take a cold shower, or like what?
So
what's the degree of that?
So cold, you can do it through. You have a variety of different methods. Anything really that gets you cold. I mean, truthfully, like if you have nothing else, just being out in cold air if the air is cold enough.
Yeah.
But submersion's the best, and I learned why it's the best is because you exert or you release body heat 10 times faster through water when your body's encased in water versus through air. So I can't remember what the term is for that process of the release of heat. But you exhaust heat much faster through submersion when you're in water versus just through the air. So that's why an ice bath is going to be better than like a cryo chamber. You've heard of the cryo chambers where get the freezing cold air or whatever. And those will still have an effect. I'm sure it's going to be cold, and probably some different effects in that it's more surface of the skin. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that. And I should preface all of this that I'm not an expert in any of these categories. I have just spent a lot of hours on the podcast. I'm trying to reiterate as best I can some of the things, and I probably will botch some things and maybe speak incorrectly. So let's put that disclaimer as that I am a jack of all trades when it's coming to a lot of these topics. Some I feel more confidently about if we're getting into like strength and conditioning and those kind of things I have a lot more experience and time with. But like I'm not like a sleep expert or anything like that. But again, things I've tried for myself and applied to myself. Done these things, felt effects. Done the ice baths, felt effects. So back to your question. So here's some basic rules of thumb, and then we'll talk about like the quick overlay of some of the different areas you'll tap. 55 degrees or lower is where you really start to tap into the beneficial reactions and the things that you get from that deliberate cold exposure. Your window when you're at that, and that's saying you want it to fit within this time window. You can go warmer than that. You can go like in the 60s if needed be, but you're going to have to go a longer period of time, which people don't. Not a lot of people want to sit in the ice bath for 10-15 minutes, or they want to stand in a shower for 10-15 minutes under 60 degree water. So at 55 degrees and below, you start to reap the benefits, the maximum benefits of cold exposure within this 30-second to 3-minute window. So this is a not very long protocol that you got to do. You just got to exist in this state of extreme cold for 30 to 60 seconds, or 30 seconds to 3 minutes. You got to exist in that at 55 degrees or less, and you can do that in a shower or you can do that in a bath, a full exposure, which is probably going to be induce a higher level of induction of these reactions because you're going to be rapidly dropping in temperature a lot faster. You've got exposure to all parts of your skin and body at the same time, especially if you fully submerge all the way up to the base of the neck, which is what you're supposed to do because there's parts of your some system, I don't know, you're losing me on terms on that area, right at the base of the neck where getting that cold specifically starts to elicit a lot of these responses. So at 30 seconds to 3 minutes of cold exposure, just to kind of scratch the surface on some of the different categories of what it works. Dopamine, it drives your dopamine, and we could talk an entire. There's multiple 3-hour podcasts on the Huberman Lab about dopamine, and dopamine is just the big driver of like every motivation that you do. You're drinking this coffee because of dopamine, we'll do a quick little thing on dopamine, and then because it'll help to understand why the ice bath and why the dopamine spike is so profound and important. Yeah. So dopamine in your brain happens in little tiny ups and downs and then big ups and downs depending on the level of excitement or motivation we have for that specific thing. So like you're like, man, I want that iced coffee from Warehouse 4. Well, you have a little bit of dopamine that just increased from thinking about it. That just made you happy to think about something that's pleasant. Okay, so now because of that little quick up, you get a little quick down. So, and when I say up and down, we're talking from what's called your baseline. This is very important. Your baseline level of dopamine. Say your baseline is 100. We're just going to throw out a number that's easy to relate to, 100. So when you think about it, you go like 101, and then you go down to 99. So when you go down to 99, you go into a little trench, and what does that cause the body to want to do? Pursue more dopamine. So now you're like, I'm going to go get that. I'm going to go get that thing. So you go up, and now you're like at 102 because now you're en route to go get your thing. So, then you go down and then you're like, okay, you're really in anticipation. Now you really want it because you're there, you're waiting for it. So you're at like 98, 97. So now you get your coffee and you go up to you drink your coffee. You got it. Yeah, I'm so happy. I'm at like 110. Sweet. Okay, well then you have your coffee and everything like that. So then you drop back down to like 95 because it's a quick burst in dopamine. So anytime there's a quick burst, which is anything considered an hour or less, is something that is a quick burst of dopamine, which will have usually a drop in dopamine below the baseline. But the drops aren't necessarily bad things, they just motivate next behaviors. So you get the reward, dopamine goes up. Now you seek the next reward, what's the next exact thing you're going to do, the next place you have to go, the next thing you want to pursue, the thought, the on your phone, the thing you notice that gives you dopamine, that cool video that makes you laugh. Every behavior, every movement, every next decision you make, every motivated effort is driven by your dopamine system. Dopamine is your driver for your focus, energy, concentration, and mood. So, bigger rewards, bigger increases of dopamine, but also bigger drops in dopamine, which pursue next spike in dopamine. Let's use a hard drug as an example here. And this is a good comparable because of the comparable amount of dopamine increase. Like a drug like cocaine drives people's dopamine up tremendously. I've never done cocaine. Never. I'm to understand that it drives people's dopamine up tremendously in a short time, so they feel euphoric, they feel like Superman, they're motivated to do anything. But then what does anyone that's ever said they've done cocaine say? The next thing happens is they crash. They go from up here to down here into a valley way below their baseline. Yeah. And so what do they want?
Can you move a little?
Oh, sorry. So what do they want? What does then that person want? How does addiction formed? And dopamine is a game of addiction. Or addiction is a game of dopamine. Yeah. As in many other things, everything is a game of dopamine. Everything we do is dopamine driven. Yeah. So, and your baseline matters. Where your baseline at? Is that at 100? Is that 150? Is it 200? And then what kind of person are you at each baseline? So this is where deliberate cold exposure and the other categories get really, really cool. So anyway, back to the mechanisms of dopamine. So every decision, up, down, up, down, up, down. We do a hit of cocaine, we're way up here, then we crash way down here, and we want more cocaine, and now we're addicted to cocaine. It's bad. So that's why cocaine's bad. That's why big, massive increases in dopamine in the short terms are not necessarily good things. But they can be. They can be like sugary foods. Give you big increased dopamine, you want more sugary food. So anyway, everything driven by dopamine. We got that. So deliberate cold exposure gives you a massive increase of dopamine. They found that. And it happens, and it's equivalent to like a hit of cocaine, but it doesn't happen all at once. It happens over a 4 to 6 hour window. So it's a big arch. And the beautiful thing about it, this is a big rush of dopamine that is doing what for us? Driving our motivation, energy, and just drive. It's up here. it never falls back below baseline. So you just get this big arch effect of dopamine. You're Superman for like 46 hours. It happens over a gradual period, slowly arch back down. You never go into a dip or a valley. This is one of five categories that can drive up your baseline level of dopamine. So I'm operating at 100. Okay, that's pretty even keel. But then I start doing things like exercise, deliberate cold exposure, nutrition, medication for dopamine if like I need a medication, things like Ritalin, modafinil, Adderall. These are dopamine driving medications. So medication and sleep. These things are the things that if you improve them, you improve your nutrition, you improve your fitness or exercise, physical activity, get deliberate cold exposure. These are things that they give long extended above an hour increases of dopamine and they don't drop back below your baseline. You always return to baseline. And because they can extend over an hour, they can, if you do them consistently, they will drive up your baseline level of dopamine over time. So say you just have all these things kind of average and you're at 100, but all of a sudden you get way better at sleep and way better at nutrition, you start doing cold exposure and you start pushing some of these buttons, you're doing some of these behaviors, now your baseline's here at 150. And all of a sudden you at 150 doesn't operate like you at 100. Because what do you have at all times? More dopamine? Because it's your baseline. That's just your standard of living unless you press these buttons to make them go up or down. Or do anything that makes it go up or down. Now if your baseline's 150, now you're more driven, now you're more motivated, now you're generally more elevated, now you're more in pursuit of more things, you have more neural energy. You're also less likely to procrastinate. Because what is procrastination? It is something that you negatively associate with. Like, this is good, I like this, but man, I gotta write a 15-page exam for my dissertation. That's like, ugh, that's hard effort work. What's that do? That actually pushes us into a dopamine trance and we pursue something else.
Yeah.
Procrastination is distraction with something else that takes us it distracts us from doing the thing we need to do but we don't want to do. So something unpleasant, but it's something we need to do. We divert around it through procrastination by seeking other things that give us dopamine because this put us into a place of dopamine deprivation because just the thought of it, doing that 15-hour distance, so sometimes it's hard to initiate starting that. So if you do something to increase your dopamine, like, hey, you want to sit down for that paper, well, go work out beforehand. If you work out beforehand and you take an ice bath, and you take some caffeine, well, all of a sudden you're like, okay, let's fucking work. Let's play. You're like, I'm charged up. I'm going to knock this paper out in 1 hour. I'm going to be the master. And then now your entire perception against that task is different. You're like, I'm going to wreck this thing because you're super charged up on what? Dopamine and epinephrine and norepinephrine and serotonin and all those brain chemicals that we can regulate that are all cold water exposure, good nutrition, caffeine. These are all things that deliver those systems. And when you manipulate them, you control your levels of mental drive in so many capacities. And if you do them a lot and enough, you raise that baseline up so you just operate at a general higher level. And that's what I've been doing a lot lately. And that's why I was already an energized person, but I realized that I had some behavioral habits that were missing, or I was doing some bad ones like improper utilization of caffeine, and that turned my sleep button on a little bit better, and all of a sudden here we go. Doing cold baths on top of that, eating better. I got okay nutrition most of the time. Now I feel like I'm getting much better nutrition because I'm just pursuing more knowledge about nutrition, what's best for me and what matches my goals. So now I'm eating in that directive. My training is moving and evolving because I'm learning more and applying little modifications there to what I do for myself and or my clients. That's driving things up even higher because I'm seeing results from that. Other things that drive your dopamine are like little wins, like when you have a victory, when you are successful at something, you're playing a little game, you're playing spike ball and you win, your team wins. Well, that feeling of satisfaction, driving dopamine, that just drives your motivation to pursue that more. That's why winning feels good, because it just gives us that little dopamine shot. So everything is driven from all those neurochemicals and all our behaviors. And it's really cool because, like I said, you can leverage, and if you start to understand those systems and how you can leverage those systems, then you have immense power over your own current state of being and how to be able to optimize pursuing whatever you want to pursue. Like, you want to learn more and you want to motivate yourself to learn more, well, do something that gives you dopamine prior to that bout of activity, and you're going to feel yourself much more mentally engaged to pursue that, even if it's not something that necessarily seems great, or even if it's work. Like now I can get pumped up for any kind of housework because like I'm like, I know the reward afterwards, what this is going to provide for me. It'll make my wife happy. That's good. That gives me feelings of satisfaction. It will be clean. That's nice. We'll have these nice flower beds, and I've planted like 8,000 flowers, but that will look pretty, and those visual stimuli will give me more dopamine. So now it's like I look at anything that I do a little different because I'm like, how is this feeding into those chemical systems in a positive way to give me the most of what our body wants and needs to be able to operate at its best and or feel its best. It's all about control of your brain state, and that carries over so significantly. But what we do physically, how much physical activity, the way we train, the way we eat, the way we sleep, all of those behaviors directly play back into our mental state and release of all these chemicals. So it's this beautiful orchestra of brain and body, brain and body, brain and body.
Yeah.
The better you get on both ends, you start to feel like, hey man, I'm doing a lot more, but I'm more motivated to do a lot more, and I have a lot more energy doing a lot more. And you're like, what is this? And I'm like, this is Super Saiyan 3 compared to Super Saiyan 2. So, yeah, like I've dealt really well in a lot of these areas before, but now I'm getting the real science behind it and the real and the real okay, now I can understand how to do this the best way possible. And holy crap, I just feel like I've taken it myself to another level. So that's why I get excited about sharing this kind of stuff and talking about this kind of stuff, because it's had such profound results for me, which I've already considered myself pretty high functioning, pretty active, very busy, very productive. I've accomplished a lot that I'm very proud of over the years, and I'm like, man, what if that was me just firing on half cylinders? Now I'm getting this brain stuff going, and it's not like I didn't understand these things, but now I wasn't applying them, and I wasn't pressing these buttons that I've learned from the Huberman Lab about how to just understand and regulate these systems a little bit better, and that's the crazy journey that I'm on, and it's just a lot of fun.
So if I understand you right, you're taking like your, say like a cold exposure. Mm-hmm. You're doing that right before you want to do something like work or say like school or something like that.
Yeah. So for me, and there are some caveats too about cold and certain considerations that we can go into. Mm-hmm. My usual habit. So some other things. We mentioned 55 degrees and 30 seconds to 3 minutes. We just talked about dopamine. We haven't even got into the other categories. Like, again, we could go cold exposure. We got a nice little caveat about dopamine, which is like, man, people even like heard any of that, and they're like, I need to learn a little bit more about what he was talking about with dopamine. Yeah. Literally learning about dopamine in your brain will change your life. Yeah. It'll change your life. That one podcast on dopamine that I learned in Huberman, it was like an absolute game changer. Afterwards, I was just like, what?
It's
everything is different now. So it's one of those things that like 3 hours of your life, you're a different person. And you continuing to evolve to figure out who that is, which is really, really cool. Yeah. Just because of a greater, deeper understanding of my own brain chemical system. Mm-hmm. But back to cold. I kind of lost where I was at in the...
Like your cold exposure habits.
Mine. So trying to get to 11 minutes a week and that's again, like say that's like 2 minutes per day, every other day, maybe it would be 3, whatever way you got to get to 11 minutes. That's basically, if you're in that range, you're really cold, you're getting the benefits on those short-term exposures. There's a cumulative amount of an average of about 11 to 12 to 13 minutes per week, and you're pretty much at the cap. You don't need to do any more than that, or much more than that, unless you want to, for just that moment acute effect of like, hey, I just want to wake up right now. So I've gotten cold like every single day now, further back than I could tell you when I started this, and that's either with like a 90-second cold shower or getting in the cold tub. So and I'm a big cheater when it comes to the cold tub too. I have a hot tub. So I get warm in the hot tub first, and then I jump into the cold tub, freeze my ass off, and then I jump back in the hot tub. So there's no fear. I'm like, I can just kill myself here. I can just freeze and shiver because it's way harder to get out when there's no hot tub. Or not just to do it in general. It's to convince yourself to like, I'm going to go outside where it's cold. If this is a cold month, if it's a cold day or cold month, get in this freezing cold tub that's even colder, and then get out and then like fucking hobble my way back. Sorry, language. Hobble my way back inside and find a towel, or jump in my shower and freeze. And then now it's more than just a 2 to 3 minute cold thing. It's like a 10-minute cold thing. But so for me, I'm a cheater. I can get in the hot tub, get warm, jump in there, freeze, and then jump right back in the hot tub, warm back up. Still reap most of the benefits. I kind of miss out on some of the metabolism benefits, increasing metabolism benefits. I kind of stifle that by not letting myself warm back up on my own. You maximize thermogenesis, so the body's rewarming of itself. If you get cold, then you stay cold. But I do that every day when I cold shower, so I kind of offset it. So if I can't get in the tub, and I try to get in a cold tub at least twice a week, but otherwise it's the cold shower. So hot tub in the morning, get outside, get my morning sunlight exposure, wait on my caffeine, all that good stuff. Then I'll take a shower afterwards, and the last 90 seconds of the shower, I'll flip it all the way down to cold and just freeze. And just I'll usually rinse, lather up all that, and then when I'm rinsing, I'll just count down from 90, spinning circles, and try to regulate my breathing. Yes. So that's kind of my routine is morning. Morning is usually best because for most people, you're about to go to work and you're about to probably, as most people do, you're going to do most of your exhaustive mental tasks, most of the harder part of your stuff early in the day. That's how I like to operate. Get it over with. Get it done with.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm going to be at my most mentally and physically engaged. And if I can work out in the morning, I'll try to do that as well. So I like cold in the morning. Cold's great in the morning. Also, because of this, and here's another crazy sleep thing too. Another caveat for your sleep. You have thermal regulation with your body temperature that plays in your circadian cycle. Your body raises 1 to 3 degrees in the morning and up throughout the day, and at night it drops 1 to 3 degrees throughout the night. And that directly plays into your circadian cycle. So it's better to be cooler at night. Don't sleep with a bunch of blankets, because if you get hot, it's going to interrupt your sleep because you're going in the adverse of what your body wants to do. It wants to kind of cool itself. So cold in the morning is good because it follows suit with your, because when you get cold, you put yourself cold, you think it's going to lower your body temperature. It's not. Your body is going to fight to raise its body temperature back up. You go into thermogenesis. So you get cold in the morning, you get in the cold tub, you get into the cold shower. You're going to also play into your circadian rhythm and your body's natural known, this is about when I wake up, this is about when I need to go to bed, because you're stimulating that increase in body temperature. Your body temperature wants to come up throughout the day. You're doing something to trigger that in the morning by getting cold, because the body's reaction getting cold is warm itself up. So the adverse works at night, getting in the hot tub or taking a hot shower or sauna at night, because you're now warming your body a lot. So what's your body going to do when you overheat it? It fights to go back down. It now initiates the process that your body naturally goes through at night, so you can kind of jumpstart your temperature regulatory cycle when it comes to your sleep. So another thing to do is to help wake up in the morning, cold. To help fall asleep at night, warm. But don't be too warm while you sleep, right? Because if you get too warm while you're sleeping, now your body's trying to get to this temperature. You've got a million covers and blankets on, so you're getting hot, you're sweating, and that's why usually when people wake up and toss and turn throughout the night, it's because they're too warm. Even if they don't perceptually feel I'm too warm, their body might be a little too warm for what it would optimally like to be at for sleep, to my sleep. So cold exposure in the morning, generally good for reaping the benefits of the brain and body, or the neurochemical drivers that increase your motivation, all that kind of stuff. Also plays a little bit into that sleep, that wakefulness cycle, and it's going to wake you up. You get in the freezing cold, it's driven to wake you up, and we want to wake up in the morning, so that's good. So for me, I have this perfect combination. I go outside and I get natural sunlight. I do warm with the hot tub, but that doesn't really, it's not going to make me go back to sleep or trigger me, and I'm still warming the body up. But then if I I always either get in the cold tub or after the hot tub, get in a cold shower. Make sure I end on cold, so that my body again does what it's supposed to and warming itself up because of that last thing being cold. Another caveat about cold is if your goal is hypertrophy training, my goal is to hit hypertrophy markers because I'm inducing maximal muscle growth, then deliberate cold exposure. Showers are probably okay. They've mentioned that showers are because they're not nearly as in-depth and profound as far as the muscular reaction. You'll still get a lot of the brain release chemicals, but you're not immersing every part of your muscle in that cold water like a tub. So showers, but in the tub, cold water within 4 to 6 hours after hypertrophy training could be advised against, because you block some of the signaling that is happening in the occurrence of events of engagement of protein synthesis. There's a lot of little signaling pathways that occur within those first few hours after hypertrophy training. So if the goal is to maximize the benefit from hypertrophy training, then taking an ice bath after that within 4 to 6 hours is advised against. And also, as mentioned, how like warming or getting cold in the morning is good for waking up. It's good for actually causing the body to warm itself up. That's why it may not be the best idea to do cold exposure at night or a few hours before bed. Because first of all, you're going to jump all those chemicals. You're going to get adrenaline going in your body. And we don't really want adrenaline to go to sleep. It's the adverse. That's for wakefulness and drive, and we're ready to go. So you're doing that short-term acute, but then also with the temperature regulation. If you're making your body, you get cold, so your body tries to warm up, but it's at nighttime supposed to be doing what? It's supposed to be going down.
Yeah.
So cold at night, and in two different ways, is kind of working against your sleep. And what do we know is like, hey, before cold exposure, before you're doing that, what's probably the number one thing you want to work on is sleep. So if anything interferes with sleep, like the timing when you do cold, you got to weigh that into consideration. And it's strong enough. It is absolutely strong enough that I don't know if you've ever, like, as a teenager, gone on like a late night swim in some cold water, or ended at any point. Have you ever swam in a pool late night? All of us, like a pool party. You get real awake real fast. It could be 8 p.m. You're kind of tired. You get in that cold water. All of a sudden, you're ready to go till midnight. And all of a sudden, it's midnight. And you're like, oh, I'm starting to get tired. Well, it's because you, without realizing, you upped your adrenaline in your body. So the timeliness of these things do matter a little bit as far as if you want to continue to make sleep the priority, which sleep should be the priority. But also doing things to drive these dopamine systems, the cold exposure is really, really cool. It's not hocus pocus. It is neuroscience driven. These are absolutes. There's no exception. Like, this is just how our body reacts to cold. It's just basic, human neurochemistry. It's really cool.
That is really cool.
So easy to do. But it's really hard to do. It's really hard to get started. Once you start doing it and it becomes part of your routine, like then you have a different relationship with it, and you love it. Like, I love getting cold, not because I enjoy being cold or shivering. Actually, I hate it. I hate that part of it. But I just know what lays on the other end of it. I know what the next several hours are going to be. I know how it affects me, makes me feel, and I know what I've been able to accomplish now adding this into my life and routine. And now it's like there's no going back. Like, I'll just be getting cold forever.
I'll just be getting cold.
Every single day we're going to find like that 90-second shower or dipping into some kind of cold plunge or cold water, whatever. And it's so easily accessible. And it's just not something that it's just the in-depth neuroscience has come out so much more recently. But let's just off the top of the fingers the other benefits. Big drive in metabolism increase if you stay cold and let your body rewarm itself by thermogenesis. I made a video on conversion of white fat to brown fat, and I probably did a terrible job of like explaining how that really works. But it actually changes the fat tissue in your body to become more metabolic and more usable for energy utilization. Yes, it changes the actual physiology of the fat tissues because of the release of norepinephrine during the process. That increases mitochondria in those cells, changes them into this like super hyper-engaged fat cell called brown fat, and that is a lot more readily available for energy utilization if you get yourself in a calorie deficit. So brown fat's it's just another great thing that just promotes the metabolism benefit. And then we're talking, the cardiac function increases your heart rate, so you've got that playing in there. And we've got the reduced inflammation markers like, muscular inflammation, joint inflammation, reduced overall markers from continued exposure. Again, getting that amount of time weekly, that average amount of time, you can actually reduce overall like health inflammation markers, which are good for overall longevity health. So there is just so much on the short and the long term. Like right now it gives you energy, right now it gives you focus, motivation, and drive. And accumulatively it gives you a better state of well-being, and also it touches your metabolism, it touches all these other systems, and it's just always there. It's always available. Because everybody's tap water comes out at like 55 degrees. So even you don't even, they'll make this the last caveat, and we'll dive off of cold exposure. But like, you don't have to start at the coldest. You don't have to start at 55 degrees. Whatever feels cold for you. So if you're creeping your shower down and it's like, ooh, there it feels cold, but you're not all the way to the bottom, the coldest it'll get. As long as it gives you the reaction of, I'm cold, I hate this, I want to get out of this. This is really uncomfortable. but I can make it, I can get through it, and you just bear through it, and you're in that position where you feel like you're having to bear through it. That's the entire intention. You're trying to induce a stress reaction from your body. So this person's reaction threshold is going to be different than this person's reaction threshold depending on how cold adapted you are.
Okay.
So the more you do it, the more cold adapted you are, and you're going to have to start creeping down. Once you become pretty cold stratified, then you're going to have to get into that 55 or below to really reap the full benefits. But again, it will not feel as bad. 55 won't feel as bad as it used to. It will feel a lot different than it used to. My shower used to feel a heck of a lot different than it does now. Now it's more manageable. And so now I have to pursue those cold baths and those cold dips to really get the super cold that I want.
Yeah.
Because the shower can only take me so far. So,
Okay.
I'm considering getting one of those like deep freezers and converting. So I've seen a lot of these cool videos of people converting deep freezers into like recurring cold baths where you don't have to get new ice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can even modulate them to be able to like control the temperature, control when they come on and off for energy saving purposes. It's really
that's
some
cool.
people have taken it to a whole nother level. It's a really cool thing that like people are becoming more and more open to, and then some people are really doing some cool stuff with technology. Or you can spend $5,000 on a plunge, which is the one now that some company came out with that does all the bells and whistles of everything. It's like a hot tub, cold tub thing deal that filters the water and all that cool stuff. But it also costs a lot of money. So I don't just have an extra $5,000 laying around for cold.
Right.
Especially when most of the time of the year in Ohio, I can just put the cold tub out in the yard or on the driveway, and it's cold enough.
Yeah, it's like
breaking up ice off the top. I'm like, here we go. And again, I'm a cheater though. I have the hot tub. I have the biggest disadvantage. But heat. There's another side of the coin. Heat does a lot of stuff too. Sauna, hot tub or spa, benefits of heat. There's a whole other podcast. I haven't listened to that one yet because I got a long list of order when I want to listen to them in.
Got a list of it.
Deliberate heat exposure. And these
awesome.
And that's just one area that people can work on. There's so much stuff on nutrition. There's an understanding of nutrition training methodologies, and all that kind of stuff. And that again, they cover so many of these different bases on that podcast. So it's cool to actually just have this kind of podcast kind of reiterating a lot of stuff I've learned from the Huberman podcast, because if there's any message I get to get into is watch Mike's podcast, but also like if you specifically want to touch a certain topic, the Huberman Lab is amazing. Yeah. I grew up, I've had ADHD my whole life, obviously. I was on Ritalin as a kid, and not until like more recent years did I ever really fully understand what all of that really was and what ADHD was and I listened to the Huberman Lab podcast on it and learned about basically what my life experience was growing up and why I was on this medication as a kid and what that was trying to do and regulate, and what my interruption was with having ADHD as it is a neurological disease. And that was really kind of cool and profound, because it was just like during that one, and that one tied super into dopamine because it's an interruption in dopamine, or it's a deficiency in dopamine. Okay. Kind of a combination of both with people with ADHD. So that's why Adderall, Ritalin, modafinil, things like that, those are dopamine drivers that increase dopamine because people with ADHD experience less symptoms of their ADHD with increased dopamine, which can also be controlled by behaviors and nutrition, working out, fitness. That's why in the 5th or 6th or 7th grade, I can't remember exactly, when I found fitness and weight training exercise, I just like took it and ran with it and became addictively obsessive with it. And it was because it was giving me a huge dopamine drive, and I was a kid with ADHD. And when we found something like that, for me it was exercise, thankfully. Before that it was video games though, addictively to the point of video games where I was playing way too much. And I learned from this podcast, I was like, oh, that's why I was literally so obsessive about video games, because it was giving me a huge dopamine spike, something that could, with me having ADHD, having the ability to not focus, but when we found things with it would give us a high level of dopamine, like something we really, really loved and enjoyed, it would cause a hyperfocus, or the adverse effect, or the ability to ridiculously overfocus even for hours at a time on something like that. So that's why when I found video games for a period of time in those young years, like middle school age years, I became like over the top. It affected my grades negatively. And all of a sudden, found the wrestling team in 7th grade in the weight room, and it was just like sport. And those are huge. That's huge increase in dopamine from physical activity. And all of a sudden I was getting off my medications and stuff like that, because I was getting medicated through activity, through just a different source of dopamine. Through now I'm going from very little physical activity overall to like now I'm lifting weights and building muscle and I'm on the wrestling team and working my ass off.
Yeah.
And that made me feel amazing. It made my grades go up. It made my energy go up. My behavior improved. Basically kind of helped me to work off of. I transitioned from medication, being medicatedly treated of my ADHD, to self-medication through high levels of physical activity. Which was really cool. And then, So that podcast right there just taught me a lot about myself and like why I am the way I am, why I pursue behaviors the way I do, why I like what I like, and that like coming out of that, I was just like, dude, everything is different. Like everything, it's like now there's like a reason to think like, why do this? Why do I want to go do that? Why pursue this behavior? Why is this good? Why does this jive with me? Why does this thing seem not jivey? Using words like jive and jivey. Man, he's an odd one. But it's like once you start to like just understand that we are just more or less a recipe, and who we are is a recipe of our experiences, and who we exist to be in our current here and now is a production of our perceptions of all that is around us in our current experience. And diving into things, I mentioned a little bit about meditation and how that's kind of helped open my mind to like the understanding the difference of like interruptive thought, like past or present tense thought, interrupting, like being mindful and being in the here and now and being able to be perceptive of things around me, versus having a more greater regulation of that, of when to allow myself to freely think and just let thoughts kind of run their course, or when I can set those things aside, not let them interrupt tasks that I want to be focused and mindful about, or being in the moment with somebody where I'm not like sitting trying to have a conversation with somebody, but I'm thinking about 4 other things because they're trying to interrupt my train of thought. Through meditation, I've found increased levels of control. Not just meditation, through increasing my dopamine, increasing my adrenaline and things like that, through deliberate cold exposure, through enhancing my exercise and getting more work and output. All these things drive focus, they drive concentration. So my ability to disassociate, from random interrupting thoughts to just being current in the moment, being able to give 100% of my concentration and focus to a given task versus being mentally pulled elsewhere. Just being open-minded to that I have control over those systems. I can regulate my own internal chemicals based on behaviors I do or things I consume or whatever to optimize when I can be most focused, and through meditation have a greater understanding of like those different states of being. Am I in a state of forward or retractive thought where I'm planning or debriefing something that happened in the past? All thoughts are past or future tense. So you're either in the past or the future in your mind, or you're in the current, or you're in some combination of both. And understanding like, hey, you have the ability to span between these different areas, these states of thought. And okay, right now I'm not going to be interrupted by past and future tense thoughts. I'm not going to be planning for what I'm going to do next. I'm not going to be thinking about what happened this week. I'm going to be doing this now. Whereas before, without even the knowledge that I could separate that, my thoughts, everything just kind of occurs as it does. You're along for the ride. So like in a nutshell, with all of this stuff, like really my own personal journey with like applying a lot of these protocols, pushing these buttons, heightening these systems, getting my baseline levels of dopamine higher through cold exposure, it's given me like kind of almost an enlightenment to the fact that like you don't have to. I think up to this point, I was mostly in the passenger seat, along for the ride. My brain was just kind of going and reacting, and I wasn't conscious of the ability to manipulate these systems and or even be conscious of differentiating these systems or states of being. And now, knowing that, and having applied that and having experienced that change and that progress, and now it's just like, man, it's your entire kind of perception of reality changes. Truthfully and honestly, like you kind of look at everything differently. You kind of look a little bit more extrinsically, like not just me and my universe, but like Mike's over here in his universe and his experience, and you're sitting from there looking at me like everyone's in their own kind of different universe and has different thoughts and ways of thinking about things, and all of that is kind of construed from just what we know, how much control and knowledge we have over, are we in the passenger seat or in the driver's seat of our own systems, and it has become very freeing to feel like I'm more in the driver's seat, being able to press these chemical buttons in my brain to make me behave or be able to heighten my level of engagement in a certain area, being able to control my thoughts better, be able to control when I feel moments of stress or anxiety and how to extinguish those. Just the ability to do that and know that there is the ability to do that, and then I'm on this journey of being able to increasingly be able to do that in a better way. That alone has kind of, like I said, it changes like your whole perception of everything. It's like life doesn't just happen to you.
Yeah.
No, it happens to you, yes. Certain things that are out of your control, absolutely. But then the complete other half of that is how you intrinsically react and or move and, react to those stimuluses. And just being able to slow things down a little bit. Like if something were to make me angry, I did this whole little tangent on like anger and angering thoughts and how there's more or less that you're kind of hostage to that unless you just don't let yourself be, because you can have control over that. And there's a very simple thing you can do to mitigate anger. But just again, the knowledge that we have so much more control than we realize. I have so much more control over my own brain and my own emotions and my own anxieties and my own fears and my own level of motivation, my own mental neural drive. I have so much more control of that than I ever thought imaginable. And I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. I'm like, dude, if I can learn this in a very short window of time, granted, I've probably, what most people consider, probably put an obsessive amount of time into these podcasts. Like I'm talking in the last several months, countless hours. But again, I'm driven by dopamine. The knowledge, the increase that I'm learning from this stuff is making me want to pursue more. I'm like, dude, I've learned so much. I feel all these positive changes, and it's not like I was in a bad place before. I thought shit was hunky dory before, but now I'm like, whoa, hunky dory looks like this, but like I don't even know what to call this because I'm in a state where I feel like I haven't in my entire life. Yeah, and then I'm really firing on all cylinders, or maybe I'm not. Maybe there's more. There's probably more. There's probably more cylinders I don't know about yet that I can get firing, and that's the really cool and exciting thing about it.
Yeah, that is
because
really
there's
cool.
Still so much new stuff coming out.
Yeah,
and it's wild. So if anyone I could put like a takeaway for anybody is just like take a little bit of time to start looking at like what you can do to leverage your own brain and your own systems and how you can control your mood and or all those different categories of existence, of experience, of perception. Once you realize you have a lot more leverage of that than you realize and figure out the tools to do so, it makes life a lot more, I wouldn't say better is the right word because it wasn't bad before, but it just feels more optimized, more full, more complete. Like I really am taking in everything as much as I possibly can. So.
Yeah, that's cool. I have two questions.
Yeah.
One is going back to, you said, and this is a fairly large backtrack, but you said that cold exposure, like deliberate cold exposure, can help to elicit a change in fat from white to brown fat, right?
Yeah.
Have you coached anyone to do that, and then have they seen results from that? I'm just curious.
So, as far as it would be hard to be able to dissect that out specifically because there's a lot of other modulations people are working on and how well they're doing specifically. Like, how are they making all their workouts? Are they hitting their calorie deficit and everything? If that's all staying constant and consistent perfectly, and then you added the deliberate cold exposure and you saw a change in the rate of that would be trackable, but nobody is that perfect that you can really could really correlate it to just that.
Okay,
it would be really hard, and
it would just
most
be
people,
one of many variables.
Right, a lot of people have tried. I don't know how many have been able to start consistently doing it, at least to the degree I have. One of my friends, his name's Dusty. He does 3 minutes. I'm like, 90 seconds is good for me, man. I feel great 90 seconds in the shower. Like, I'm good to go. By 90 seconds, I'm ready to get out. And he does 3 minutes religiously every day, if not in the cold tub. So, and he, I would say, granted, he's made some other modifications too. Me and him talk a lot of this stuff all the time. We talk almost every day. And, I've seen his physique changing in the positive direction, reduction of body fat.
Dang.
But yeah, could I say that specifically to that degree, we've isolated that out as the core determinant of did you increase your rate of body fat removal. Can't say I've confirmed something like that, but they know this because there are studies, there are case studies, and they've done research to confirm that yes, this is happening, this is occurring in this degree. So again, all this stuff is it's not opinion, it's not theoretical. This is things that they're not putting it on there unless this is statistically and factually backed by a lot of really incredibly well-driven research. Yeah. And so you can pretty much count on most of the things. Again, I can only reiterate it, and I'm probably botching certain things, but you can take most of these things as kind of like a physiological law, because that's what it draws down to. Is just like, this is just what happens, and this is just how it works. Yeah. And it's pretty cool. Like the stuff on like nutrition and everything like that, and or like how to manage like fat loss versus weight gain, and like the absolutes that as far as like laws, like requirements, like it's a lot simpler. Most of this stuff is a lot simpler than it sounds, because when you start talking brain chemicals and like, you know, when you're talking like, oh, what's a caloric deficit versus a surplus and all those things, like terminology can get a little bit out there, but when you get past the terminology and you understand the basic principles, they're not that complex. Yeah. And most of this stuff is pretty easily manageable as far as like behavioral habits and diving into all those things. So it's fun for me though, because like we've done fitness and training and strength conditioning for years and years and years, and my philosophies are always growing and evolving and changing. And the trainer I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, is not the same that I am now. I have new and updated and informed knowledge, which is what I think all trainers should be pursuing. Continuous knowledge for optimized methods of getting results. So it's been cool for me to, while I've done some of these really deep dive stuff on stuff that's not it's just not out there. Like no one's out there now people are talking more about ice baths and dopamine and stuff because Huberman's changing the world. Swear to God, it's one of the most listened to podcasts in the world right now. Yeah, wow. It's just gone nuts because people are like, oh my God, like this is life changing, groundbreaking stuff. Yeah, and it's all science backed. So until recently, like, a lot of this stuff is it's just not been that easily accessible. I wasn't going to go dig through like neuroscience textbooks to like really grasp it. But he's put it in such a plain way that I've been able to palate, and I have enough background experience to be able to really get I think what I feel like is a strong enough understanding to be able to help reiterate it and to be able to help apply some of these things to some of my clients. And we've seen some really, really cool stuff. Another really cool one, a cool just thing that I learned, and it comes down to energy regulation. I've had a couple classes, and I've had a couple of my private clients try it, and it's immediately, you could see immediate results, especially with these fitness tracker watches. And that was like down regulation of the heart rate after intense exercise, and then what that does as far as for your energy systems for the remainder of the day. So more or less, like when you exercise rigorously or you have an intense mental bout of work, you increase all the fight or flight chemicals, again, dopamine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, all that stuff. You're in up mode. Well, if you leave yourself in up mode when you leave the workout and you don't do anything to down-regulate, you're going to continue to exhaust your system beyond just what you did within that workout. And that can be a negative if you have to continue with work through that day. So if anyone's ever experienced, they work out really hard and then they're kind of up, they feel like their heart rate's up a little bit, they're still kind of sweating afterwards, everything like that, and then several hours later you kind of feel a crash in energy. That's just because you left the hose on all the way, right? Or not all the way, you left it on drip. So when you're working out, your hose is on all the way, everything's firing, all the systems in your body, you're at a max heightened state, and then if you don't down-regulate, then you more or less, you kind of turn the hose off mostly, but you still leave a drip, and that's going to affect you later into the day as far as your energy system. So what I learned is that you can, if you do like a 30 to 5 minute breathing focus on slowing your breathing down, in effect slowing your heart rate down, taking a longer exhale than you do an inhale, so doing like a regular inhale and then trying to do a slow exhale through the mouth, usually through like pursed lips, to make it as long and drawn out as possible. If you do that for 3 to 5 minutes after training, you can see a dramatic drop in your heart rate, and you're basically turning the faucet off all the way, or more so that you're not continuing to tax your nervous system throughout the day if you still have things to do and you don't want to have a crash or a lull in energy later on.
Yeah.
So 3 to 5 minutes after you finish working out, just stop, try to get into a kind of a quiet place where you're not going to be interrupted, maybe even close your eyes, do things to kind of close down your sensory perception, and 3 to 5 minutes of just trying to slow your breath down, deep breaths in the nose, out the mouth. And I've had clients do it, and we check their heart rate at the beginning, and I've seen people drop 40, 50 ticks. They're coming out of the workout at like the 155, 160. And all of a sudden, 35 minutes later, they're walking out at 105, 110, and continuing to drop after that because they've signaled their body to downregulate. Okay. Whereas the same person would normally, before doing that routine, they would, say they walk out the door at 155 heart rate. 15, 20 minutes later, they're still at 135, 125. They're downregulating much slower, and they are again taxing their nervous system beyond the workout. Which again is going to affect energy for the remainder of the day. So that's just a cool trip that I learned, and that's just when it comes to energy. I'm sure there's some other positive effects about getting back to a state of rest for your heart rate post physical exercise. But again, that was just a cool tip that I had a couple people try, and we're just like everyone's the same, hitting like 30, 40, 50 beats per minute drop in their heart rate in like a 3 to 5 minute span, whereas normally it would have taken significantly longer. And it's just by them literally consciously taking the time and effort to downregulate through their breath, which is really, really cool.
Cool. Yeah, I was just checking make sure it's still recording.
Right. Yeah. That would be crappy.
It's like, yeah. But I had my second question.
Yeah.
Again, kind of going back a little bit, but. You're talking about like ADHD and how it affects like dopamine, like it's a neurological thing. Mm-hmm. What, like how does that affect? What exactly does ADHD do? Like what is it affecting? How does it make you function? That kind of thing.
So ADHD, attention hyperactive deficit disorder, more or less. So there are two real it's kind of a toss-up between, is it mostly this, mostly that, or mostly a combination of both? They found in people with ADHD, it's either a lower general baseline level of dopamine. Mm-hmm. And so when you have a lower baseline level of dopamine, you have lower levels of motivation, you have lower levels of focus, attentiveness, higher levels of procrastination. Well, these are the primary symptoms of people with ADHD. Attention hyperactive deficit, attention deficit disorder. It used to be called ADHD, and then they added hyperactive. The hyperactive is because of the opposite effect of hyperfocus activity, which is kind of, I kind of alluded to that a little bit. So with ADHD, you have either deficiency in your baseline level of dopamine, which can be corrected through medication like Adderall or Ritalin to get your baseline up a level higher your level of dopamine, you experience less symptoms of ADHD. Again, these work for everybody. If you have lower levels of dopamine, you're going to have less focus and everything like that. But it's more profound in people with ADHD. Okay. The symptoms of not being able to attend, not being able to focus, all the things are more dramatic. And there's also the possibility that along with either the low in dopamine, it could be or a more than likely combination of, there's also interruptions in the dopamine pathway in the brain for people with ADHD. Meaning, like say you have a band in your brain, you got the drummer and the bass guitar, and you got these brain chemicals that affect how your brain works. And then you got dopamine, that's the conductor. The band is your prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of your brain that drives movement, motivation, decision making. Mm-hmm. Your driver of your prefrontal cortex is dopamine. This is where the interruption occurs, is between the dopamine and the prefrontal cortex for people with ADHD. So it's like the conductor is conducting, but he has a tiny little conductor stick, so they can't see. So there's an interruption. So the band and the conductor are off. They're off time. And so there's interruption, which means you're experiencing higher level symptoms of attention deficit disorder, inability to focus, things like that. And then the hyperactivity usually is associated with when kids with ADHD or people with ADHD find something they really like or they love that gives them dopamine, they tend to pursue it with a tremendous amount of affinity, or what they even call hyperfocus. So we have we struggle with the ability to focus on things that we don't like schoolwork. That's why kids with ADHD struggle in school, because they can't focus on the subject matter because it is of no interest to them. But say they really like gym class. This guy, I was king of gym class because I could move. It made me feel good. It gave me dopamine. I liked the sport. I liked the activity. I liked it. So I could get super focused for gym class, but all the other classes were a no-go. So people, or I give the example of video games. Like when I found a certain video game in middle school, I obsessively played it. I started eliminating other activities, stopped hanging out with my friends as much. My grades were slipping because I was obsessed with this video game. I played it so obsessed because it was giving me tremendous amounts of dopamine. It was essentially, I was self-medicating with this dopamine driver in the form of this video game that I loved and played way too much. So, people with ADHD, if not properly treated or regulated through behavioral habits, can pursue bad things that give dopamine. That's why kids with ADHD pursue really sugary foods because it gives a high increase in dopamine. And that usually associates with high energy, right? They eat a bunch of sugary foods, so they got really high energy. And it can manifest the inability to attend and focus on one thing. So what do? They're fidgety, they're moving, they're touching, they're talking. I was a talker. So if I couldn't focus in a class or with my ADHD or whatever, which I wouldn't, I wouldn't shut up. I'd be talking to other kids. I'd be talking out loud. I'd be being disruptive. And so that's what, there were issues with my behavior because I was disruptive because I was not able to focus. So I was medicated with Ritalin, which worked, but it also had adverse effects. It affects your appetite. It can affect your appetite. It can affect your personality because basically, I was put on a stimulant as a kid, which you take a kid that's ADHD, put them on a stimulant, it has an adverse effect. It doesn't affect everybody like it affects everybody else. You put anybody that doesn't have ADHD on a stimulant, they go bonkers. So they get really people that aren't supposed to take Adderall, and they get super hyper focused. But people with ADHD take Adderall, they feel normal. They just feel like they're supposed to. They don't feel like they're lost in the minutia of I can't regulate my behaviors or thoughts or my decision making, or I can't prioritize a sequence of events to be done in the most effective manner for my timeliness. That's why people with ADHD generally are late. They run late a lot of times because they can't manage their time and being able to leave from their destination and get to the next destination on time. There's a lot of interruptions. So again, you drive up dopamine in people with ADHD through medication or better sleep, better exercise, better nutrition, deliberate cold exposure. You reduce those symptoms significantly. And then, so that's for me. I got off medication as a kid because I found weightlifting, I found sport, football, track and field, wrestling. I was always lifting, always moving, always active. Started eating better, started focusing on my body and eating good, not eating didn't really pay attention to sleep until more recent years. When you're a kid, you're getting enough sleep, usually because you don't have a million things to do in life. Actually, no, probably not. I was up till probably 1 a.m. playing video games some nights. There were definite bad habits in there as well. So I more or less grew out of having to take ADHD medication because I found supplemental behavioral lifestyle habits that gave me the exact same thing that medication gave me. It gave me some dopamine. It gave me norepinephrine and epinephrine. It gave me serotonin. It gave me acetylcholine. It gave me all those brain chemicals that made me feel normal, made me feel the ability to focus. And my grades in high school went way up. By college, I was dean's list and stuff in college. I did really, really well. I'll just missed graduating with honors. If I would have not skipped one class, 3 or 4 days, then I would have got the attendance grade, which would have put me above honors. So I always say that. I was I almost graduated with honors, but I didn't quite attend class enough in college. But we still made it. But that's and that was fascinating to know that. Okay, along with everything now that I'm working with, understanding how dopamine works and all the things that I can improve to make that run better, it also explains my whole life. So that was really eye-opening. I listened to the one on dopamine, then the one on ADHD, back to back. I think it was in the same day. And it was 6 hours. And afterwards I just sat there, I was everything makes so much more sense. It's my whole life makes sense now. It's I now understand why I am who I am and why I can super hyper focus. And when I put my mind to something, and if I'm enjoying it, where I can outwork anybody on that given task, or I can work for bountiful, endless hours at a time, or I can concentrate on this, or I can get an immense amount of energy to drive towards certain things if I'm really inspired to do them because I really like them, or I'm really excited about the outcome of them.
Yeah.
And so like now I look at my ADHD as like a superpower. Like, hey, not everyone else has the ability to press a hyper focus button. I just got to know how to press the button and know and perceive the outcome and perceive the reward, or knowing that like what the activity is I really will enjoy, or it's going to have a tremendous benefit. So a person like me finds like something like ice baths and I'm like, oh yeah, that gives me more dopamine and it's good in all these different measures. Well, that's even more compounding evidence and motivation to do it more, because I'm like, ooh, it gives me good stuff and it's doable and repeatable, and now I can hyper focus that and make that become part of my regulated routine. But that all snowballs in a very positive direction. And now it's allowed me to have more energy to pursue more knowledge, more energy to train harder, more energy to work here all day and then still go home and get stuff done. It's allowed me to be like a better husband and like be able to like take care of like getting more done around the house compared to maybe what I was doing before when my wife's working very, very hard, working crazy shifts and stuff like that. So it's like spilled over into all these different categories of my life unintendedly, because I've just now have more energy and more motivation, not even just energy, more motivation. Like I just do things automatically now, not just because I want to, just because I know that it'll produce either a good response for me or it'll make someone else happy. Like I try to do things for people here. I try to like pay it forward and or just try to put others' well-being as a priority as well. And doing things that gives me a great deal of satisfaction. That what does that do? Continues to drive up my dopamine even more. It makes me more motivated to do the next good thing, or help the next person, or teach the next person the next thing, or to do the next thing for myself. And it just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. And it's just like all you got to do is just kick the snowball off the hill, and then just watch the magic happen. And then just be open-minded and gain a little bit of knowledge on how you can tap all these different systems and buttons. And all of a sudden that snowball is just crazy. And I'm rolling down the hill right now. Up the hill and down the hill. I'm up the hill in a metaphorical sense of like, hey, we're making really positive changes, but that snowball growing as I go down the hill and being more motivated to pursue even more and more and more. And I'm like, this is just awesome.
Two things on that even. Say you have a client who has ADHD, and like they're just getting into working out, and you're coaching them, and what would be like the number one thing that you would want them to do, or that you would coach them to do in order to take either advantage of them having ADHD, like you were saying, like press the hyper focus button, or like to regulate it?
That's an easy one. Figure out what they like the best, because what's the most important thing about any training program or any nutrition program beyond the content of it is your level of adherence to it. So if you're not going to adhere to it because you don't love it, or you don't like it enough to at least be able to do it consistently, if you just you're okay with it, you're like, weightlifting's okay, well, that's not a lot of a foundation to do it long term, or to make sure that you don't miss, or that you don't skip. If you like it more, you're more than likely you're going to have a higher affinity to be able to pursue it ongoingly. So the best nutrition plan, the best form of exercise for anyone, this goes beyond people with ADHD, is one you're going to have the highest adherence to. What foods that you can eat ongoingly forever that are good, that fit your goals, what exercises that are good, or types of exercise, whether it be running, rowing, biking, playing sport, lifting weights. What's the highest level of adherence? What's gonna, for that person, so immediately assessing like what either exercises they like, or what category of exercise they like. Do they like short burst, like heavy lifting? Do they like type 2, 10 to 15 minute type 2 cardio, where they're operating at a pretty high level of exertion, but for that like 10 to 15 minute, do they like 20, 25 minute bouts of steady state cardio with a lower level of overall exertion? What's their favorite? Well, okay, that's the number one thing, because the number one thing that's going to help them overall is adherence and consistency and getting in the movement. Well, it doesn't matter what the movement is it matters that the movement occurs and it happens. So whatever can get that person moving the most the entire week, that's where I'm going to lay my number one weight. So when it comes to like, okay, if someone's lifting, I want to figure out what lifts they like or what body parts they like to train. So I'm asking those questions. Like, what do you want to hit? What goals do you have? Usually it's in the form of like, hey, what area do you want to work on the most and everything like that. Like, we're going to work everything regardless. That question is irrelevant. But like, that tells me like, okay, you have a perception that you have that leg exercises are going to be better because you want your legs and your butt and your abs to look better. Mm-hmm. So in your mind, in this person's mind, they perceive leg exercises as being better, more beneficial. So they're going to have a higher affinity and a gravity to want to pursue those and more likely to enjoy them and have the likelihood of repeating them and coming back and being motivated to come and do that next session. Mm-hmm. So again, whether it's lifting, whether it's more like cardiovascular focused lifting, like like circuit training, things like that, whether it's really heavy or hypertrophy splits, doing different isolated muscle groups, all those things are great. If the number one consideration right now is adherence, which the number one consideration for anybody across the board when it comes to like just helping somebody get into routine of training, is figuring out what's going to have the highest level of adherence. Mm-hmm. And then from there, once you get them consistently training, you can expand into what's the most optimized way to train them to cover all your different categories of training, from endurance to power to speed to muscular hypertrophy to VO2 max to things like that. Mm-hmm. You get him going, get him consistent, get him in routine, and utilize what you can figure out very quickly to be the things that they enjoy, that they're going to have the highest level of affinity to continue to pursue. Okay. Because the total amount of movement is the biggest dictator in body weight, body composition control. How much we move and then how much fuel we put in our body. Food, movement, food, movement, food, movement. Mm-hmm. And so you got two big things to weigh out, and you've got a lot of consideration within movement. What all is there you can do with movement, and what all is there you can do with nutrition? But those are the two big categories that play into your calories in, calories out. Mm-hmm. Calorie expenditure versus calorie intake, which dictates and drives weight loss, gain, or body composition change, fat loss to muscle mass increases. Oh yeah. But yeah, to again just reiterate the answer to the question, whatever they're going to be the most likely to want to continue to do, get them going on that first, and then expand upon that and try to experiment with finding other things that are motivating, or again creating understanding of like, hey, and they'll be a lot more likely to understand why to lift weights if you could explain to them and get them to understand, because it makes your bones denser and your muscles stronger, and it actually helps with your mental health, and it promotes dopamine in your body, and it just, that list goes on. So there's an endless amount that any form of training will do. There's specific reactions and adaptations to that specific types of training elicit. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, when it comes to like weight management and long-term health measures, movement and and energy utilization, how much energy we're putting in, those are like the big main ingredients that we gotta look at. Then when we start to dive into like, do we want to put on more muscle tissue, or do we specifically want to reduce body fat? Now we're starting to push a little more in depth into these different categories, and how do we train versus how do we eat, and specific amounts of certain macronutrients, or specific prescription, how much strength, how much hypertrophy, how much endurance. Now we get into the minutiae of those little details. The first things first, and the big one that most people are going to get completely, or that it's going to take most people the biggest hurdle to really fully understand and get in a really good place where they have a tremendous amount of efficiency, is that calories in, calories out. Mm-hmm. That is 90% of the battle. You get through that, and you get to that place where your calories match your goal, to match your level of utilization, how many calories you're burning. Once you get that figured out and you understand what food costs calorie-wise, and what, all the, equations that go into that, which is not that much. Once you get to that point, like, it simplifies tremendously. Yeah. But it's very hard for people to change eating habits. It's very hard for people to change movement habits. But the best driver behind those things is more knowledge and information, because if you understand the why behind it, you're a lot more likely to do it. Oh yeah. So yeah, I would agree with that. It's there's a lot of cool stuff that goes into it. There's still so many like nutrition focused ones that I'm going to dive into to just even learn even more. Because all the little minutiae details I love, just because I don't know. It's fascinating. I've always loved the brain and the body, and muscles and performance and working with athletes and everything like that. And I was like, yeah, the brain's there too. It's important. But now it's like, oh man, like you really put those two together and you get them to synergistically work and maximize everything up here and everything down here.
Yeah.
And then how much that spills over into the other. It's like then you're touching planes of existence. Your experience in this world, unlike any other time in your life before, when you've put yourself to that point, when you've achieved maximizing and utilizing all of these different systems to their maximal capacity or whatever you can, it literally changes your whole entire perception of reality.
Yeah, right.
Which is, and it's a good place to be. Feels great. Feel motivated, happy. I don't let the things that used to maybe stress me out a little more so or cause me to like ruminate and have moments of lesser happiness and just feeling of wellness and feeling. I know how to modulate and control and extinguish those when I need to. I know how to process them when appropriate. Being able to just control my energy at will. Being able to flip those switches. Like midday, I hit a hard-ass workout in the morning and I do a bunch of work and I'm working with a bunch of clients. And I hit that midday tired. Well, I need a shower and I hit that cold again for 60 seconds. And then it's like hitting another cup of coffee, but I didn't drink coffee. I just got cold again. Dopamine spike back up, serotonin, all that stuff, or adrenaline, all that stuff. Ready to get right back up here, get back into it, and now I'm pressing buttons I wasn't even aware existed prior to just a few months ago.
That's cool.
Or that at least maybe I knew that I knew they exist. I was aware, but I wasn't consciously aware that you have so much control over them.
Yeah,
so,
really.
Yeah, because I guess I always knew that when you get really cold, that you kind of wake up a little bit. And he was like, okay, but you never used that. I never saw that as a tool. Now I'm like, that's a really strong, powerful tool. Like super, and it does way more than just wake you up. And I'm like, okay, now I just want to freeze my ass off all the time.
Yeah.
So it's really fun, and it's really fun talking about it. Just the accessibility of knowledge these days, and all this stuff is applicable to so much more than just like fitness and health, or like to your performance in your job, performance in anything, like your just life in general. You just want to have more energy to like go home and play with your kids after a full workday. It's there. It's accessible.
Yeah,
it's accessible. It's just pressing these buttons and understanding how these systems work a little more in depth and how you can have control over them. And everyone has a higher state of being that we all have the potential to tap into, and I think I'm just starting to make that ascension to that next level for myself.
That's really cool.
It is really cool. I love it. It's really fun. People probably think I'm like crazy over here, like he's freezing and he's talking about meditating. I'm like, no, the neuroscience behind it works. Like, go look at the brain scans and stuff, and like they will show you like you can rewire your brain for the better. In so many ways. Yeah.
Well, cool. I want to end with just like complimenting you a little bit, because you're like I've been at Empower since you guys opened.
You were just a baby.
I was a little guy.
How old were you when you started back with Will, like at the rec center?
At the rec center?
Because it still counts. That counts.
I would have been like maybe 12 years old.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So it's like you're 21 or 22?
21, yeah.
So we're almost at a decade. From you live in the Empower and the Ashcraft training Taekwondo background life. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure just to see you guys grow, but also like something that I admire about you and Will is like you guys are very dedicated to the people that you're training, that you're coaching, that you're just like mentoring or just around. Like the people that you guys are around, you guys like are dedicated to them, and that's something that I appreciate a lot about you guys is like you care. You care about the people that come in here, and you want to help them to grow and get better. And I have benefited from it by now I'm a coach here, and I'm able to do like this podcast, and it's created a lot of opportunities for me, and it's just a blessing to be able to work with you guys. And
awesome. Same goes on mine, man. I appreciate that. And like Yeah, that's the why. That's the why do we have so much passion for all of this? And it's literally the people, because it brings me so much gratification to see people reach goals and to make improvements and to make adaptations. And if I've had any way in influencing that, that just makes me feel even better that like, hey, you know, it worked and we helped someone get to a better place or achieve a result. And like it's what we always signed up for. It's what we always wanted. You know, I always wanted to. Ever since I started working under Larry, you know, as a teenager, I wanted to be him. I wanted to be able to help people and to be able to take what I know and be able to make it more useful than just beyond myself. Like I can't keep all this cool insight that I've learned to myself when I have a platform and I have an ability to share it. I'm blessed enough to be able to call it a career. But it is very humbling to see like how it's evolved from just me and Will trying to make a name for ourselves and kind of get started to like seeing guys like yourself who just started here as kids grow and evolve, and how it's influenced your life. And it's like I was being molded and influenced like under Larry, and he was driving me to make decisions in my life and pursue things in my life and make goals for myself at that age that now like I'm starting to be on the other side of, where now people are looking at me at the way that I used to look at Larry, and that's really, really a really tremendous experience. I'm always trying to like, I want to do my absolute best job of that. I want to be the people who regard as like, hey, Mike's really knowledgeable and really outgoing, and he's always the guy that'll give you the shirt off his back, because that's who I want to be. I like people like that. I love people like that. In fact, I always think that like the mindset of pay it forward, help thy neighbor, do something for nothing, for no return of reciprocation, just because it's for the sake of helping somebody out, that because you can. And so, I've kind of built my life and my mantra around that. Like I think that's a good way to live your life and a good way to be. And that's like, tomorrow was my last day on this earth. It's like, how do I want to be remembered? Or how would I want people to regard me? I would want people to say he was incredibly giving. He was incredibly, he was full of life. He did a lot of things. He was very motivated and inspired. And he had an affinity for wanting to help other people feel that way as well. Because I love feeling great. I love doing things to make myself feel better and have the best experience in life possible. And health and wellness is such a tremendous, monumental aspect of that, and that I have so much information that I can share to help people to increase their wellness and their overall feeling of satisfaction in this world and their quality of life, literally to make their life better. There's nothing sweeter than that. And to have been able to create this place, this gym, which brings so much positivity. So many people come through here. So many people are influenced by so many great coaches. So many people are having foundational things for their entire life. So many of these kids that are in here training at a young age are developing mindsets and probably behaviors that I hope carry on into the rest of their lives, that are going to promote their mental health and physical health. To be at the helm of all of that and to see so much of that happening, it's not even through myself, through my team, through our staff, and all that they do, that is just like, it's almost overwhelmingly like satisfying, because it's so much more than I ever imagined it would become. And we're helping so many people on so many levels, and it is just, it's everything when I say living the dream, I mean it. There's hardships too. It's not like it's all sunshine and rainbows all the time. We have issues that we run into at times, but it is truthfully like that is living the dream. Seeing and knowing the legacy of what Empire will be, how it'll change people's life, how it will help direct people's lives in different directions, whether it be their field or just their overall health. Trying to put tread back on people's tires, put years back on their lives in reversing and working against negative health habits, and just being a vessel to be able to provide that. This gym being a vessel to be able to provide that, it is so much more than I could have ever asked for, and feel just blessed to be able to do it, blessed to be able to sit here and have conversations with guys like you, who we've literally watched grow from a boy to a man and starting to pursue your own interest in trying to make the world a bit of a better place. That's really what it comes down to. Like, this is Empower, and what I'm doing now, working with my clients, even just putting stuff out there. It's like, that's how I want to leave my mark on trying to make the world a better place. And if like that's a pretty good goal in life, right? Like, if there's one goal to go away with, like, that sounds like a pretty good one. Like, make millions of dollars, whatever, you know. Like, you don't have to be having millions of dollars to be happy. You don't. You do not. So that's not my goal. It is to make the world a slightly better place, and maybe somebody will remember me someday as that guy that really helped them, or really helped them to make a positive change in their life, or even just that my gym, like, hey, Empower Gym, set my foundation for my career or the rest of my life. Even if I wasn't directly associated with it, just knowing that, you know, I had a part in building the temple that is now, you know, affects so many lives. Unbelievably, incredibly rewarding, and still pinch myself every single day in appreciation for all that we have and how far we've come and how many people support us, because it's cool. It's so cool. It's amazing, and it's so much more of an experience. There's things about it that are so much more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. And even just sitting here talking about it and voicing that out in the open is a great reminder and a great way to take a second and really, like, ground yourself in that appreciation of, like, wow, like, this really is a special place. What we do, what we get to do, is really a special thing. The fact that we get to call this work or career, it's so sweet. It's so sweet.
It really is.
So,
well, thank you for the conversation.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure, man. It was just like time freaking flew by, man. I could sit there and do this again, and I feel like, you know, if you'd be up for having me again at some time,
I would love to.
We should deep dive into some other topics, because there's tons of other areas that we could pursue, and I hopefully by the next one I'll have a couple more podcasts under my belt that I can maybe regurgitate some of the positive, or some of the insight to, again, give some people, if someone can pick up anything from this today, if one person watches away and applies something, or like even looks into something a little more, that could catalyst a monumental change in life.
Dude,
so
it really could.
That makes sitting here doing this all the worth it, let alone it was just enjoyable to do, and sitting here and talk with you and talk about these subjects that I love. But just the knowledge that, like, hey, somebody out there, hopefully this, you know, catalyst something for you guys. And I still want to mention one more time, I want to reiterate the Huberman Lab podcast, Andrew Huberman, just profound stuff out there, and I can't get enough of it. And again, a lot of things that I know from my own personal experience over years and years, and from what I've picked up in school and things like that. But a lot of stuff, especially things that we covered today, were more recent topics that I really dove into through that lab and through that podcast. So if you want to expand upon any of these things, that's where I would direct you, because that guy's changing the world. And if I could meet anybody celebrity-wise, I'd call him a celebrity now, because he's gone worldwide. I would meet Andrew Huberman, because in the last less than 6 months, he's changed my life in so many ways, just because of the information he's put out there and made readily available to the public that is very understandable and easy to digest. And it has opened my mind to so much more. So,
cool.
Man. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely.